I will ask you guys a question that I asked Miss Elizabeth Snap when I sent her the passage for this morning. If you've ever heard the passage, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, raise your hand. Yeah, this is a verse we all know. How many of you realized that it was in the midst of a stewardship message? Show of hands. We got one, maybe two. A lot of people don't like to talk about the context of this, because when we think, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, we think that it's that positive power of positive thinking type of message. That Jesus is in some way or some form a steroid shot that just, whoo, I got some strength now. I can lift this altar. As if I could somehow, through the power of Christ, overcome the bolts that are holding it to the floor. That's not how it works. That's not exactly what it means. And so we're going to talk about what that means, and my take on stewardship in general. And that take is this: stewardship is trust. Stewardship is trust. And what I mean by that is not that when we think of this verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, it's not about having some dream or imagination that is completely unrealistic, but instead doing that which God has called us to do without fear, without hesitation, because we trust that if God has asked us to do something, that God will provide the resources necessary. So I had to do a little bit of digging. Recently, I've been trying to learn how to be a better father, and so I looked up, at what age do children begin learning about trust? And how do you teach a child about trust? And it said something along the lines of, the article I read, that is, said something along the lines of, at around the age of 4, they equate trust to believing you or not believing you. Things are because mommy or daddy said that they are. Either they believe you or they don't believe you. And so my son and I got into an argument over candy. Well, he thought it was an argument. Let's just put it that way. He thought that I ate all of his candy. And I pointed out to him that he had had 4 pieces, and I had only shared 1 piece with him, and that we had eaten that piece about 30 minutes prior to this conversation. And I had told him at the time that we were sharing in that piece together, that was the last of them. And he was not pleased with that answer. And so, because I had just read this article today, I'm thinking, oh yes, I'm going to be a great parent right here. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to teach him that he should trust what I say. I thought. And believe it, I wasn't actually that far off in this instance. Usually, with 4-year-olds, nothing works. But anyways, I picked him up. I held him close to me, and I said, George, do you know that Daddy doesn't want to hurt you? He said, yeah. So I held him out right here. I said, George, do you trust that your daddy's not going to drop you? He got a little frantic. This is a little boy who just recently jumped from the high bar platform down into the foam pit in his gymnastics class, and he's sitting there 3 feet above the ground going, no. He didn't quite trust me in that instance. He didn't quite believe me in that instance. But it did stop the argument, so I guess we got there a little bit. So the thing is, he did not trust in that moment. He got fearful. He didn't believe me. And so when we say, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, is do we trust that God is going to back up what God says God is going to do? Do we trust that God is who we say that God is? Because if God is who we say that God is, then why would we ever fear? Why would we ever doubt? And yet, we do. And it occurred to me, using this illustration, it occurred to me with this matter of trust, that the difference between terrifying and thrilling is trust. When you sit down in a roller coaster and that bar comes down, you're holding on. That ride is fun because you trust in that bar. The first thing they do when that attendant pushes it down is you push back up on it, right? You test it. And when it holds true, you can sit back and enjoy the ride. Maybe a little bit of screaming might be involved still, but it's fun. And so, I must ask, are we terrified of what God is asking us to do? Or are we joyfully going along for the ride? You see, because if I think that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and that it's the power of positive thinking, I might just think I can fly. There's actually only one saint who's been recorded of kind of floating through the sanctuary, and that's Teresa of Avila. And that was on other people's account, not her own. So I don't think, just based off of the odds, I don't think the Holy Spirit will lift me through this sanctuary. But if we could put some trusses up there and a wire if you want to do that. So instead, let's go back to this altar rail. If I pray hard enough, is God going to allow me to overcome those bolts holding it to the ground? If my faith is strong enough, will God allow me to overcome those bolts? Because often when we talk about stewardship, we're talking about money and time and things that are difficult to give. So if I use an illustration of something that might be difficult to do, will we get it? Will we get that sometimes it's about using the right tools to overcome the obstacles that God puts in our life. Now, I'm not actually going to go through the time it takes of unbolting these 6 bolts. But you understand, the power that God gives us to overcome things sometimes doesn't look like the strength that we think it is. If something doesn't look like the strength that we think that it ought to be, maybe we'll take a closer look at the word strengthen. The Greek word, I can't pronounce it. That's okay. But one of the things that it said in its meaning is to empower. Christ empowers us. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And so if Christ empowers us, what are some synonyms? Ooh, I'm getting tongue-tied. What are some synonyms of to empower? One of the things that I found particularly interesting was to commission. And the reason that I wrote that word down out of all the synonyms is because that's the one that for me fits this context. Not this room's context, but this scripture's context. Paul is talking about the secret to being happy and well-fed or being in need in all things. Not here, that's a different passage. Is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In having plenty, in having little, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so if we think about that in the midst of stewardship, I may not be able to put $1,000 in the plate every Sunday. I may only be able to put 5. I might not be able to put anything. But if I am following God's will, if I am seeking God's guidance in all things, then if God puts it on my heart to do something, then God will provide the means to do it. And so there's, in the midst of our ministry setting right now, a hurricane relief effort going on. Some people are putting checks in the offering plate. Some people gave checks to me after service that first Sunday that I called for it. And others are collecting items. And we paired up with North Texas Tumble and Cheer out of Argyle, the gym that my wife helps run. And they have coordinated and are coordinating 75 flood buckets, cleaning kits. That's huge. That's more than I could do by myself. That's more than you can do by yourself. That's more than any small group of us could do by ourselves. But in working together, in partnering with other groups in our community, amazing things are happening. God is providing the resources. And so it takes something as terrifying as flood relief and gives us the thrill of being able to do far more than we thought, because we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, who empowers us, who commissions us, who calls us to the work that we're about. Our church is in its stewardship season. And in stewardship season, some people tend to not like to go to church because they think all they're going to talk about is money. Well, money is only a fraction of what stewardship is about. When we pledge to join the Methodist Church, we say our oh my gosh, my brain just shut off. Time and talents is what she just said. Anybody remember the Methodist membership vow?
Prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness.
Prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness, actually. That's 5 things. Money is a small part of that. If you are living your life in a way where you publicly display your faith to others, in a way that makes them want to follow Jesus, in a way that makes them want to be a part of the church that you're a part of, because they just got to be a part of what you're doing. That's far more than any amount that you can put in the plate. It's far more. If you can serve the church with your time and your talents, the church, no matter how much money we had, can't afford to pay every single volunteer position. No church can. No matter how big their budget, no matter how deep the pockets of the people in the pews, that's not a sustainable model for church. And so next week when we ask for a commitment, it will be an asking you to trust God with your time, your prayers, your presence, your gifts, your service, and your witness. And so what that means is if I'm in church 2 out of 4 Sundays a month, that I might push myself a little bit. See, what can I do to make it a 3rd Sunday every month? What can I do to make it a 4th? If you're faithful in attending worship service every week, what can I do to attend a Bible study on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? How can you push yourself? And if we don't have it yet, then let's work on it. Because if God is calling you to it, then we collectively can do amazing things. The question is, will we flinch when God asks us how much He wants of us? Will we fear? Will we step back? Or will we say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and step up to the plate and go along for the ride? This church already this year has been asked to extend itself. And I'd say it's a pretty fun ride. I'm enjoying it. I know that many of you are as well. And see, the thing is, when God sees us step up, and we feel that, and we feel the blessing that it is for when I call and God responds, or when God responds and when God calls and I respond, then God calls me again. And again, and again, and again, and again. And eventually we might look down and go, how did I get where I'm at? I'm at the top of this roller coaster, and I'm not sure I trust this bar anymore. Hold on. Hold on. Because God is going to do some amazing things. No matter how far you may get from where you thought you wanted to go. No matter how much you push back on that bar, God holds true. God's faithful to be with you no matter what. And that is good news. Because we can do all things through Christ, who strengthens us.